I'm going to introduce myself very briefly. I'm in Thailand. Today I'm in Pattaya. I'm master trainer in ICQ Global. And I'm a kind of instigator to bring today our host and Professor Cecilia Estoque. She works in China, and during this week I was seeing how she is working with kids and parents, and how she's kind of impacting in kind of the root of the issues that we have always in leadership and teams and all these kind of things, because we are working with adults, and she truly works with the basis, and this kind of is really inspiring. I'm so glad to join with her these last 2 days webinars that she is doing, kind of with the crisis of the coronavirus that they have there is in China, of course worldwide, but in China is really Dutch, and she's even she don't stop. So I'm really kind of touched about that. So today what I want to is introduce you Professor Cecilia. Allowed me to call you Cecilia directly, and I want to kind of ask you if you can introduce yourself a little bit, Cecilia.
Good evening, good day, good morning to everybody. So I'm Cecilia and I'm from the Philippines, and I have been teaching for 23 years. And in China, I've been here for about 13 years, I guess. So I'm excited to share with you my experiences as a teacher and as a parent as well. So just wait and see.
Very good. So a question that it comes to me, and as you know, it comes from the beginning that we met, is how a university professor it gets interest and become an ICQ practitioner, because even we have someone in the education and site in Dublin who is kind of interested in this question too.
Okay, first and foremost, I was actually an English teacher when I started teaching from the Philippines to China. And then I am also literally interested in history and culture. So there's always an integration of culture in every lesson that I do, most especially when I teach business presentation, because I always train my students to think in a global mindset on how to adjust their communication and their presentation style. And then I was given the opportunity to continue teaching cross-cultural communication, given by Ms. Ilinga and also, of course, Dr. Marisco, who are both here as well. So with their advice and also the materials that they have sent for me to teach the full-term course for culture, at first it was really challenging because I know there's so much more to learn when you talk about culture. So my biggest challenge when I have received this request was, my first question is this: how do I actually teach cultural intelligence in such a short time? So we're talking about one semester, so about 30 to 40 hours range. That's a maximum. That includes also after school. So what I did during that time when I committed to teach it, I was also preparing myself. So I enrolled on cultural courses. And at the same time, I started looking for answers that would answer the question, how do I really teach, again, cultural intelligence in such a way that my students will not only learn theory, but they will actually be able to practice it. So I searched and searched, I even enrolled in classes, and then I actually found your post on LinkedIn, Cinto. So very interesting enough, I got so curious. What is this man doing in his session? I'm so curious. I want it to work. So that was the beginning of the story. So Cinto and I met on LinkedIn because of his very interesting posted comment about global DISC. So I said, like, what is this DISC? Because I'm looking for an assessment as well, because as a teacher, this is what I do. First step is I need to know the needs first. Where are my students at? We call that needs analysis. And then at the end of the semester, I should have this post analysis just to see if there's a comparison. So this is where the transformation is being measured. But I don't have that tool to actually measure where they're at in terms of cultural intelligence and how to exactly measure that. So I have searched a lot of personality tests, but it does not suit what I'm looking for. So I was looking for something else. And then Sinto introduced me to Saba, who is also the founder of Global Disc. I'm so blessed to meet this gentleman. And then when I was given the assessment, I realized while answering the questions, I realized, hey, these are the materials I'm looking for. So I signed up, I registered, and my university supported me to continue that as my professional development. And then while going through the process with Chaba, learning all the materials about global disc mindset and everything, together with what I know about culture and what I should be teaching, I realized this is the material I need. However, I need to modify it because the program is designed for people who are working in a corporation or in an organization. So my thought is, I want to bring this in the classroom. So this is something like, I don't want my students to wait and be professionals themselves, and then will be given later whatever training they will get. So why not bring this kind of knowledge, this kind of experience inside the classroom? So that was the beginning, how I tried to integrate the concept of global disc to cross-cultural communication as a full-term course for university students. And these are like undergraduate students who are graduates from high school, and it's their second semester or third semester with us in the university. So it's really exciting. In fact, tonight, I have invited two of my students with me here. I have Leo and also Davide. So they're going to tell you later about the impact, if you want to know about the impact.
Yes, we want to know for sure about the impact that it is creating. I have only one question more before that. I want to pass you the ball and you can show us your magic. Because you are teaching in business school too. So what do you think that is the differences between applying kind of ICQ global solutions in business or in universities or college?
All right. It's very interesting because I do also have a consulting firm. It's a small company. We're still starting with a goal of the one equipped. That's actually the name of the slogan that we have for Joshua Consulting. So I personally try the principles of what I'm doing. I practice it first, literally, before applying it in the university. I practice what I have learned. I try to implement what I have realized to some corporate leaders. And I have a client, or I have two clients. They're both working in a mining company here in Shanghai. And they're both going through crisis in leading their team. And they're going through a lot of things. And then I realized, when you work for corporate people, their purpose, of course, is clearly defined as to what they want, which means they already know what they want. They're more mature. So if you give them tasks, if you give examples, they easily get it because they're rich in experiences. However, in terms of, really completing the task that you're giving them, they're not as diligent as students. That's the basic thing. Diligence-wise, in the classroom, of course, students wanted to pass their course and they wanted to achieve something. So that is something I can work on. However, in terms of experiences, citing examples, because of the limitations of their own experiences and their knowledge about some situations, sometimes I find it really challenging to connect it. So as a professor, as a teacher, it is my duty to make my examples more meaningful to them, to make my presentations more understandable in a language within their terms, within their own comprehension. So if you're going to sum it up, what is it like to do it in a business corporation and to university or classroom setting? Professionals, they're richer in experience, they could easily relate and easily get it. But in terms of task completion, it takes a little while. They have a lot of other priorities. For students, task priority, yes, we have deadlines, and they can even go deeper. It depends on how far you could push them. But in terms of experiences and understanding, it takes a little longer. So that's why I'm happy to implement the program into a full term, because it gives them more time to really process what you're teaching them and then come up with their own knowledge and insights at the end. So those are the differences. Okay, so once again, thank you for your time. I know time is so precious, and the fact that you joined us on the webinar, it means a lot to us, especially for me and Cinto, because for me personally, I call this my mission, and this is where my needs come from. If you have taken the assessment on needs analysis, it's about contribution. That's the highest range in that. And if you don't know what I'm saying, we can contact each other again later, okay? So, but for me, this is something that I really love to do. So what is really uncommon sense? We are now in an unusual time. If you notice, we have a lot of things going on around us, and it's not just coronavirus, but a lot more. So I believe this is a perfect timing to talk about uncommon sense. And later I'm going to share with you what I've been doing in the university and what is this uncommon sense that I do? Why am I doing what I'm doing? So 3 questions I'm going to post, and I hope they will be answered as I complete the presentation. And if you have more questions than these 3, feel free to ask us at the end of the presentation. So first question, is there a real power in uncommon sense? Is there a need for transformation in the university? And how can I be part of this transformation? So maybe these are your questions. And again, later we're going to answer them. Okay, let me just adjust a little bit this. So again, as I have said, I am from the Philippines. Philippines is known to be Pearl of the Orient, and it is famous for its beautiful beaches, nice shorelines, seafoods, and a lot of historical facts as well. So Philippines was named to be as Filipinas. It was named after King Philip II of Spain, and it was given by Ruy Lopez de Villalobos. He's one of the famous voyagers in the world in the early times. That was around 1500s. And Philippines was written on the record when they said Ferdinand Magellan found it or discovered it. I would say discovered, quote unquote, because Philippines existed even before they said it's the Philippines. All right. So again, Philippines' name has been changed quite a few times because of many historical influences. So after Spain, the Americans came to colonize us, and then the Japanese, and then the Americans again, until Philippines gained its independence. And now Philippines is now called the Republic of the Philippines. So you see, Philippines is such a small country compared to China, but it is very rich and diverse in culture, and it's in nature. Why? Even before pre-colonial history, we were already influenced by Malays and other neighboring countries. Now, what's the point of raising this up? Philippines is such a small country, but because of so many changes, people become resilient and adaptive. And I'm a product of that change. So this is me now. So just like you and me, we are a product of our personal experiences. We're a product of our own history. And we are a product of our different encounters with individuals and groups from coming in from different culture. And that is why whatever we say on who we are, there is something more than that. We belong to several layers of culture. So now what I'm going to share with you is my story of my uncommon sense. And as you have heard from my beginning, again, I'm a product of several layers of culture. And this is what happened. So my uncommon sense could be described with my teaching experience. I've been teaching since, when was that? 1997. So that's about 23 years. So in my experience as a teacher, I started teaching in a university in the Philippines. We call it Father Saturnino Urios University. I've taught there for a year. And then I moved to another school in a K-12 school until I taught in a public school, and it is called Agusan National High School. So these schools are in the southern part of the Philippines. Now, if you can notice from the picture, the logo of Agusan National High School is the biggest compared to the other schools. Why? Because it was my turning point when I started teaching in this school. And this is where my uncommon sense story begins. So is there a real power in uncommon sense? So in that school, when I was an English teacher, we have students for around 10,000 students. Such a big number. I just took these pictures, from the internet. I didn't have any smartphone to have any of this before, but at least just to imagine what is it like to have this overcrowded students in a public school. So in my school that time, the ratio is about 200 to 300 students per teacher. So pretty much imagine me meeting around 300 students every week if my students are all present. Now, what was the challenge? It's not just the number that was a challenge that time, but it's actually the access for quality education. It was during this moment.
Actually the same.
Sorry? Okay, do we have problems so far? Sorry, I can hear some people. Do you have any questions?
No, I'm sorry. I mute. It was someone who was on mute. No problem. I mute them all. No problem. Just please follow.
No.
Everyone is so silent because it's incredible, your story. Please follow.
All right. No, I'm actually looking at their videos. It's quite strange, right, to talk to yourself without even looking at people's faces. All right. Okay, so let me continue. So in that school with this huge number, it's not the biggest challenge, but how to provide quality education in spite of the number. So again, if we're going to talk about resources in the early 2000, all right, that was like early 2000, the ratio of computers available in our campus was only 16 desktops, and they're quite old as well. So it's almost impossible to bring technology in the classroom that time. But in my principle as a teacher, I don't want my children, or I call them my children, I don't want them to be left behind. For me, no child should be left behind in education. So knowing most of my students that time were from poor families, it's easy for them to feel discouraged. And in fact, I have some who come to school and their lunch, guess what? It's just water. They would just drink water so that they can continue studying the whole day. And in that moment as well, I have witnessed students who could not even afford to buy a piece of paper, and a piece of pen. So I always remind them as a literature teacher, all I can give them is just word of encouragement. And these are the two principles I tell them. That they have to be careful in what they feed their mind, because their life flows from it. And their actions and decisions, whatever they make at present, will always affect their future. And this leads me to the second principle that I teach them, that we don't see the world the way it is. We see it the way we think. And it's very interesting because in Global Disc, during my training with Chaba, he has a specific module about the power of perception. So that's the reason the more I fell in love with this concept, because we share something in common. This has been my principle, let's say 18 years ago, 20 years ago, that indeed, perception is so powerful. It can actually make you or break you. You can actually build something on it or destroy what is beautiful. So what was my common sense? It goes this way. It is our nature to be locked into repeated patterns of behavior. During that moment, my colleagues, even my bosses, my administrators, they will always say, what can we do? These are the only things we have. But it doesn't mean it's being done, it should be done. So which means I'm the type of person who would go against the tide if needed. So I thought there must be something else. I know we are limited with these resources, but I know beyond this fence, there is something more that we can do. So I tried to think, what else can be done? The fact that you acknowledge that a problem exists, that is uncommon sense. Why? Because when you acknowledge, what follows is you feel compelled, you are compelled to solve it. I know a lot of us sees the problem. That's why we hear a lot of people complaining about things, and they're even doing that online. But what solution are they providing? So when you think of the problem, you think of the solution, putting that together, That is uncommon sense. But the question is it powerful? So let me continue my story. During that time in the Philippines in early 2000, the word www, right? www that. What is that? That became like very famous statement that time. So the World Wide Web, I have seen its potential. To be honest, when it started, I'm not even good at using internet. I really don't know how to use internet that much. But what I have for them, I have seen the potential of internet. I have seen the potential of technology in this class. This is how I envision my students to be part of the synergy of learners across the world. This was my vision. So I said, something must be done. I have to do something. Because I believe when there is no vision, people are unrestrained. They lose their direction. They lose their purpose. In fact, having a vision will make the pain more bearable. Why? Because the vision connects your present and your future. So if my students do not have this vision, they do not see my vision for them, and they always think, we don't have this, I don't have that, we are only poor, these are the only things I can do. So they will not progress, they won't move forward. So I am also showing some Chinese translation here because we have some friends from China who are present right now. And we have done some trainings before, so I'll just copying and pasting the translation here. So when you have your vision, you become more resilient, adaptive, and agile at the same time. So I believe that culture predefines one's success. So I tried to work it out. How? So you can see this was me many years ago. I was still very young on this photo. All right, so that was like 20 years ago. So these were like my students. I asked the trainer to train my students. My students thought I was really good on the internet and on computer, but I was just pretending. But actually they were being trained by another teacher because I asked her to help my students. So I was preparing my students for about three months. And then what I did is I also worked out with the community. I asked the internet cafe owners surrounding our school to be part of my project. So if we have limited internet at home, in the school, we can actually tap the community. So I talked to the principal, to the parents of my students. I talked to the business owners. So I made them my partners in learning. And I'm so happy that they all agreed. So since I got their approval and support, the next step that I did was to prepare my students. They were around 50 as my experiment group. So this 51st batch of students, they were trained how to lead certain groups because I'm going to distribute them to the different locations. So I was able to tap 3 business owners running 3 internet cafes. So during my English time with my students, I would send certain groups of leaders in 3 different cafes. And they will be my eyes and ears during that time. And luckily, Microsoft took notice of this project because they had this a competition. I didn't know it was a competition, but what I have seen is share your best practices. So I wanted to give hope to other public school teachers that in spite of the limitations of resources, there is something else that we can do. So I told them my story on how I involved the entire community. So because of this, other teachers got inspired. This is a picture on one of the internet cafes there. And then other teachers started using also technology in their classes. And we were given recognition. Microsoft gave me a recognition. They call that the Innovative Teachers Leadership Awards. I was also given recognition in another organization in the US. So to make the story short, I just want to say that each one of us is an important part, important piece of a puzzle. Your family, our school, our community. We always make a difference when we talk about success. I know for many companies and organizations and a lot of trainings that I can check on LinkedIn and other websites, they focus a lot on leadership. But what is really the meaning of leadership if it is not from the heart? So what my mission is, instead of treating the top, I'll treat the roots. So because of that, I was also given recognition in the US where it says it was, but it's not something that I'm really proud of, but I'm just happy that, our hard work is given recognition, which means this award is a doorway. It is actually a platform for other educators out there and for other stakeholders that together we can make a difference. Because by myself, there's nothing I can do. But together, we can always create an impact in the community. And that entails a lot of challenges, a lot of mindset challenges. And so you and me, if we're going to just say, okay, because it's already happening, so let it be. It's not going to solve the problem that we would like to address. Because we say culture shapes identity and identity shapes culture. Now you impact my culture as I impact your culture. Now the next part is there a need for transformation? After hearing that story, my question is there a need for transformation in our education? Schools alone, they won't be able to stand on its own. Problem will continue to exist. So there is a need for transformation from deep within. And what about in the university? Is there a need for transformation in the university? I know you have read a lot of reports about skills gap between graduate students and the job in the market. And sometimes they call it, is it really for real or it's just based on employers' perception? Sometimes they call it it's real and sometimes they call it it's a myth. And I believe you yourselves, your employers as well, you have your own, and some of us maybe are human resource directors. Is there a real gap? Whether it's true or not, it is our duty as educators to prepare and equip the students. So based on one of the researches I have read, they say employers either express displeasure with the skills of their current employees or cite the difficulty of hiring a new employee with the required skills for the open position. But when we talk about skills, really, what's the problem? Is it more about technical skills or more about soft skills? Isn't it there should be a good strike of balance between these two? If we're going to take a look again, the curriculum of many universities, a lot of them focuses a lot on technical skills. But what about the people skills, decision-making skills, critical thinking skills? What about them? What about cultural intelligence? Isn't it they're part of the soft skills? What about emotional quotient? So all of these are important skills. So how are we going to bridge this? Are we just going to address these problems in our own organizations, which unfortunately the truth is there are many companies who do not really invest on soft skills. They don't. And I don't know, I'm glad that we are here tonight. Maybe it's time. As an employer yourself probably, or as a leader of an organization, how much investment is really given to the development of these areas, these soft skills? So that is why I said to myself, when you asked me, Cynthia, whether should I, what's the difference and why did I become an ICQ practitioner? My principle is this: why should I wait for my students to become professionals themselves when they can learn it in our university itself? So again, equipping is the answer. We have to equip learners as soon as possible, and then equip them further on a better level, on a better skill level when they are already employed. But right now, it must be every university's mission to equip them not only on skills, technical skills, but also on soft skills. So there's no point educating the mind without educating the heart. When you develop cultural intelligence, as many are experts here on this webinar, it's actually preparing our mind, preparing ourselves to face the problem heads on. Instead of running away from it, we are able to face it and solve it. And that's what cultural intelligence do. It develops an adaptive mindset. But what does an adaptive mindset mean? Being adaptive means you will be able to deal with unexpected changes. Can you imagine the trauma, the pain that Chinese community, they have to go through because of coronavirus? And now it's scaring the whole world. So how are we dealing with it? How are we coping with it? If you don't have an adaptive mindset, it's going to be a torture. So instead of focusing on how are you going to cope, how are you going to make your life better, you just focus on hindrances. But that's not what an adaptive mindset means. It helps you to think, hey, there is something else. Just like in my story and my experience, I knew there were around 10,000 students in my school. I knew that there were only 16 computers, but I'm also aware that we have a strong community outside the campus. So we just have to think and get out of the box. And getting out of the box is actually getting out of our comfort zone. And that's not going to be easy. It's not really fun to get out of your comfort zone. So when you talk about struggle, the first person who will go against your will, who will go against your vision, is actually yourself. If you don't believe in it yourself, you will never succeed. But if you have an adaptive mindset, it's okay. It's going to be painful. It's not going to be easy, but you will be learning to accept the changes. So when I started introducing the integration of technology in our curriculum back in my school many years ago, I have received a lot of resistance from teachers themselves, from my own school principal, and even from some parents. But you have to show them, you have to demonstrate to them, you have to walk with them. And then after the project became successful, we received an award globally, we received recognition. The school also received funds, which was the best part. We got a donation from Microsoft in peso, Philippine peso. It's about $1 million worth of peso for trainings alone. And then telecommunication company sponsored our internet connection. So that's the impact that we're talking about when you try to measure what can actually be the impact of whatever we do. So I only started with a small vision for my student, but that was very clear vision for me. And I walked along with my students to accept that, to see it the way I see it. And because of this, their skills also improved. So my student skills, the community, people's perception about the integration of technology, it changed. So again, bringing it back forward to university levels, these are the skills that we need for our future employees. Employees who will be able to deal with unexpected changes, employees who will be focusing on solutions and not just on problems and hindrances, employees who are willing to be flexible and accept changes, and employees who are willing to adapt their skills to whatever new environment they will have in. And when we talk of employees, we should also look at them as our future company leaders. So what kind of leaders do we want? There is no shortcut to leadership. In fact, the best leaders are those who have experienced what is it like to be at the bottom. There's a saying that says, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. So how do we teach our younger generation to surf? Do we teach them the way we know it? Perhaps not the best way. Perhaps there's another way. So developing an adaptive mindset requires a lot of intelligences. Be honest with me. As a parent, for those who are parent, and this is very common too in China, when you talk about intelligences, they only know one. I'm sorry, it's not something I would like to emphasize, but there are many parents. I used to be one of them. I admit, I used to be one of them. It's all about intelligence. It's all about what you can acquire, apply knowledge and skills. So if your grades are high, you're intelligent. But as what we have said, good employees, they leave their companies not because of their companies, but because they don't like their boss. They don't like their managers. So if you are an employee, do you love your boss? If you just left your company, what was the reason behind? Or if you are the employer, how many of your members or how many of your employees left you? Why? Maybe because you need an extra dose of EQ. which we call the emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence means it gives us that self-awareness, and at the same time, your ability to manage your emotions and adjust it in a socially acceptable way. It also teaches you empathy because it gives you the knowledge to identify other people's emotions as well. So when you look at intelligences, they are somewhat like hierarchical. They have to work together. As your leadership grows higher, so as your quotient should get higher too. So which means we should not only be contented in teaching students about technical skills and other skills that they need, especially on IQ. It's not just simply be based on scores, numeric grades, or even letter grades, however you want to call it on your assessment. But we have to check as well, what about their EQ? And of course, the last part, it is the upgraded version of EQ that we always say it's the EQ++. We call that the intercultural quotient, or CQ, the cultural quotient or cultural intelligence. It is only through this intelligence that we can recognize and understand how cultural differences influence behavior. All of this together, we need all of them, and we need to really work on them. Let me share with you briefly what we have had this week, because just like what Sinto has mentioned, I've been trying to run some trainings on Zoom as well for free in order to support Chinese community. Especially now we are forced to stay at home, and actually we're working from home. And our students, well, in the university, we are now preparing for them, but in other schools, they have started already. So since last week, this is already the second week, I've been running some free trainings online. And then the recent one, it's about parenting. So what I'm sharing with you is also similar to what I have shared with parents in the past few days. So because we talked about mindset, about, how to align your behavior and your intention together, and how to be more, how to go through your values deeply, and how is your mind reflected on your behavior as a parent. This morning, one of the participants called me, and then she called her daughter to eat breakfast. But she was on her phone. So while they're eating, she's busy on her phone. And because I had children participants, I was a children as participants, literally. They were with us last night, so fun. The child said, "Mama, isn't it Miss Cecilia said, behavior must be aligned with your intention?" And so the mom explaining to her the importance of eating breakfast and communication, but actually she's not demonstrating it because she was so busy with her phone while her daughter was on her own, and asked me, "How old is this child?" She's only 5 years old. I'm going to repeat this. She's only 5 years old. So it's really interesting how our trainings on ICQ, for example, is impacting the community, and how each family can benefit from having this kind of mindset. So just what I have said a while ago, it's not just all about what you know. It's not just about your ability on technicalities, but it's also about educating the mind. As what Aristotle said, educating the mind without educating the heart is no education at all. And as a teacher, this is how I look at my students. Grades are just numbers. I always tell them. It's what you have become that matters. But of course, it works well together if they're an achiever. Grades and numbers, it would reflect. It shouldn't go against each other. So it's really important how we touch on their personality and values. So moving forward to that, as a cross-cultural communication teacher, I needed some kind of assistance, something that I cannot do. So Global Disc came, and Global Disc, Quest as well. They work hand in hand with the assessment, together with the with the materials that I'm using. So I believe these two, they become my powerful tools in teaching cross-cultural communication. So I'm really grateful. In fact, Chaba, he's so very supportive of me. Even after the training I had with him last year, his support is really endless, and so was Sinto as well. So I'm really truly grateful with this gentleman for bringing this kind of support and knowledge, not only for myself, but even to my students. So developing this kind of tools and integrating with our curriculum, teaching them to be reflective and not just being mindful, but that kind of awareness that they have for themselves and for others will truly show and demonstrate what kind of transformation we would like to see. So as I have said, as a teacher, it is very common for us to have the needs assessment analysis at the beginning and at the same time the post-assessment. So I would consider the reflective writing of my students as one of the post-assessment that is recorded. So what you can see on your screen now are just two of the many reflections I have gathered from them. So one of them, she's from Iran. I call her Bella. So she said, I would like to start by saying, I wish we have had this class during middle school or even high school. Now, the fact that it's coming from the heart of this student saying, I should have learned this earlier. How come we're not? Imagine if I did not integrate this in the university and they will just learn it later when they're an employee, or maybe not. So you see that kind of difference and impact we're talking about. Now, the other student said, she's Chloe from France. She said the class was an academic bridge between the test and the quest and our true self. So when you talk about test here, it talks about the global DISC, the assessment that they have taken, and the practical application of our concept on the DISC quest, all right? They call that the quest. And at the same time, she said she sees the connection of everything. So I'm also going to share with you one video. She was supposed to be with us. She's from Korea. And listen.